All right, in this video, we're going to be talking about how to overcome that down payment as a first-time home buyer, because that is oftentimes the hardest thing to save for when it comes to planning for home ownership. So with that being said, there's really only two ways to do it. That is through just putting more cash than you're currently putting away in the bank and just, scrimping and saving in other parts of your lifestyle in order to do that. And until you get to that 10 to 20% mark that you want to get to. Or you can use a down payment assistance program. This allows you to put less money down on a home. And so how do we actually get there? Well, we're going to use a specific example. Then we're going to talk about how inflation plays a factor in this example. We're then going to go over, okay, if we saved for the down payment, what would that look like? And if we use the down payment assistance program, what would the math on that look like? We're going to compare them. And then we're also going to talk about, hey, what are some realistic sacrifices that you could be making that makes saving a little bit easier? Because in either scenario, we're going to have to make some sacrifices. So with that being said, let's jump into the example. So we're putting $1,800 away for rent. That's the current rent budget. And I use the word current rent budget because we'll talk about how inflation changes that over time. And we're currently putting $250 away in savings. Now, this person's trying to save more, but she's struggling. She says that at the end of the year, yeah, she's trying to save 500, but somehow only half of it actually stays in the savings account because of different emergencies or unexpected costs that come up along the way. And yes, life happens. We aren't always capable of sticking to our plan perfectly because sometimes we have imperfect information. It happens. That's okay. It happens to my wife and I, probably happens to your budget as well. So don't judge. So with that being said, we have a budget for current and future housing expenses of $2,050. Now, we talked about inflation, right? And so let's just show you how inflation affects that budget, right? In 5 years, we could assume that most likely that entire savings budget is going to get gobbled up because in the state of Nevada, most landlords are raising their rents about $50 per month per year. So that means is next year, rents won't be $1,800, it'll be $1,850. The year after that, it'll be $1,900. The year after that, it'll be $1,950. I think you get the point. And so that entire budget will eventually be gobbled up just by housing alone. That's not to even consider the fact that gas, groceries, utilities, those are all going up in price too. So, essentially, you have to make more money in order to overcome this to maintain the same savings goal. That's why becoming a homeowner is so important because it reduces the effect of inflation on your budget by 30%. That means at least 30% of your budget is going to stay fixed instead of going up every single month. So that's kind of what we're striving for. Now, if we're going to be saving 20% down, a very equivalent home to have 20% down on would be about a $300,000 home with 20% down. That's $60,000 right down. That ends up being a loan amount of $240,000, which is very comparable to an $1,800 a month payment. The problem with this is that with $250 a month, it would take 27 years to save up for this down payment. We don't have 27 years. We said we want to do this in 5 years because that's when pretty much rents are going to be at our current budget anyway. And we're not going to have any budget left before we have to make lifestyle changes anyway. So if we got to make lifestyle changes anyway in 5 years, we might as well make them today, right? And be a little bit ahead of the curve. So in order to save up for that down payment though, we can't just factor in $60,000. You see, the price of housing, we said, goes up like everything else. And so it generally goes up between 3 to 7% per year in the long run. Now, in the short run, it can actually be even higher than that. It can be 10 to even 15% in the short run. So we're just going to use 7% as a worst case scenario. But just know that just because I said 7% doesn't mean the housing market can't get more expensive than 7% per year. And it doesn't mean that it might be a little bit less expensive. It's just a number that we're using for this video as what I think is a reasonable worst case scenario. And that's what you should be using to factor in the effects of inflation on your budget. You should not be using the best case scenario. You should always plan for the worst and hope for the best. So, excuse me. So we're planning on a 7% increase over 5 years. So that leads up to a home value of $420,000 a year, or about $420,000 a year. That means we're not saving 60 grand in 5 years, we're saving 84,000 in 5 years. That leads us to a monthly savings goal of $1,300 a month in order to save for that. Now, $1,300 a month compared to $250 a month, that's over $1,000 difference in lifestyle that you have to adjust somewhere else in your budget. And that $420,000 home is still going to have a mortgage payment of $2,600 a month. So we're still paying about $800 more than what we're used to, and it's still harder to save for that than, let's just say, a down payment assistance program. So down payment assistance program is going to be more expensive than $1,800 a month, but it's actually going to be less than the alternative, which is saving 20% and buying it on a more expensive home. You see, if we used a $300,000 loan amount and we said that, hey, the bank has to take on some additional risks, so they're not going to give you the same interest rate. So instead of a 7% interest rate, we're going with an 8% interest rate, and we got to add something called PMI, which is private mortgage insurance, which is what the banks use to offset the risk that they're taking because you got less skin in the game when you don't put any money down. So we're going to say you only put 1% down, so it's a $297,000 loan, and that comes out to a monthly payment about $2,300 a month. So yes, that's still a $500 difference than what you're currently paying. But remember, she's still saving $250 a month currently. So it's actually really only changing the amount of money that she's used to spending on housing by $250 a month. Now, I would still encourage her to combine both of these methods together. I would say, hey, look, save more than what you need. And so apply all of that savings, that you're getting in your down, that you're not having to save for a down payment, right? Still put that money away into your savings account, but you don't need to be as aggressive anymore. So like I said, maybe $250 a month is totally fine. So just adjust how much you're paying in rent from $1,800 a month up to $2,300 a month. Now you might be saying, well, if she's paying more in her monthly payment, then she's probably going to have less net worth though, even, if that monthly payment is going to change from $1,800 to $2,600 by putting 20% down. Actually, the truth is the opposite. She's actually going to have $40,000 more net worth if she buys the home today rather than if she buys the home later. And that's because the only way that she's gaining net worth by being a renter is by putting money into her savings account. Versus as a homeowner, she has two ways of getting her net worth. She's got the little bit of money she's putting away in savings, but she also has all the price appreciation in the home. This means if she wanted to move somewhere else in 5 years, she would actually have more buying power. She'd actually have $40,000 more buying power because it's better to have, a home worth, with about $140,000 worth of equity in it than it is to have just $84,000 in cash. Even with realtor fees and all the other expenses involved in selling and moving a home, it's still more, like I said, it's still more buying power than just renting that entire time. And it's $500 a month less sacrifice. Now, keyword, less sacrifice. You're still gonna have to make a sacrifice. So how do we do that? How do we find $500 a month in our budget? I would say the most flexible part of your needs are in your food budget. A lot of people overspend on food and they kind of wrap their entertainment budget into their food budget. And so they kind of justify the fact that they're really not spending that much at the grocery store. But here's the thing. If you spend $400 a month at the grocery store, but you spend $1,200 a month eating out, that's still a $1,600 food bill, okay? And so by learning how to cook better, oftentimes can help us reduce that. Now, if you don't eat out very often, but you find your food budget is more than $200 per person, I would say that you have room to improve. What that means is that you're probably cooking based on recipes, and a lot of those leftover ingredients go to waste. Versus if you do ingredients-based cooking, it's much more efficient to use your current ingredients that you have and only supplement the ingredients you need from the grocery store and be a little bit more creative. Now, this takes a lot of practice. I'm not going to teach you how to do it on this channel, but I learned how to do it, and I guarantee you can too. There's plenty of information out there on the internet in order to do that with. A second area is much less flexible. That's your vehicle budget. But most people underestimate the costs of their vehicle, and so they overspend on the price of the vehicle. That's the first mistake that they make. The second mistake that they make is they use a loan to buy their vehicle instead of cash. Now, the reason why cash is so important when buying vehicles is vehicles go down in value. And so if you borrow money for things that go down in value, eventually people will stop giving you money to borrow. If you borrow money for things that go up in value, like real estate, businesses, things like that, then people are more likely to lend you more money in the future because they know that you're making money on the money that they're lending you instead of losing money on the money that they're lending you. So generally speaking, it's, a really bad idea to finance vehicles unless you're doing it for a business, and hopefully that business is making a ton of profit, because or else it's not worth it. But that being said, if you can't afford cash for the vehicle, then you can't afford the vehicle. Now, we talked about depreciation and maintenance, and a lot of people would say, oh, well, I'm spending $30,000 on that vehicle because I don't want the maintenance costs associated with a $10,000 vehicle. And I'm going to tell you this, the maintenance costs are probably not that much less on a $30,000 vehicle. You see, yes, while they break down less often, oftentimes when they do break down, it's a much more complicated fix. You see, with newer parts and less manufacturers producing those parts, creates kind of a monopoly in order to get access to the parts. Plus, your mechanic probably hasn't come across that problem very often, and so it's going to take him more time in order to learn how to fix that newer vehicle, as it would be an older vehicle that he's fixed 100 times by 100 other people. So oftentimes an older vehicle is actually easier to predict the maintenance on, and you can do preventative maintenance instead of doing reactive maintenance. Versus a new vehicle, it's very difficult to predict the maintenance that's involved because the vehicle's too new to essentially have other people have the same problems that you're going to be dealing with in the future. So I would argue that no matter what vehicle you're buying, this is what you should do. You should put 10% of that vehicle's value away every single year in depreciation, because that vehicle is losing value every year, and that's the cash that you're going to use to buy your next vehicle. The next thing that you got to do is you got to put 10% away specifically for maintenance. Now, this is for a new vehicle, this is for a used vehicle, and you're going to use that money for making sure that that vehicle stays running as long as you can possibly own it for. When you pay off your loan, you're not going to buy a new vehicle. You're going to take all the money that you were paying to the bank and you're going to add that to your savings. If you do all of this, you're going to be loaded in about 10 to 20 years, because your vehicle decisions, while they're inflexible of what decisions you've made in the past, the decisions that you can control are the decisions that are still in front of you. And you can start preparing for your next vehicle purchase now, which will make adjusting to your life as a homeowner much easier, because you have to start shifting from a cash flow mindset to an equity-based mindset. Hey, how is my net worth being affected by this decision? Is my net worth going up or is my net worth going down? And when you buy a more expensive vehicle, your net worth goes down faster. And when you put more money into owning a home instead of renting a home, your net worth goes up faster, right? So, it's a trade-off, right? Do I want to own vehicles that are shiny and flashy, or do I want to own a home that's going to help me build wealth and get closer to retirement? With that being said, I do appreciate you watching the entire video. I know this topic was complicated. So if there are any terms that I used or anything that you want me to expand on in more detail because maybe it just seemed a little bit rushed in this video, that's okay. Comment down below and I'd be happy to address it. Thank you for watching and have a great day.